you first of all have to have a purpose. When you go to a networking event, don't go, I'm going to find my next client here. This is not where you're going to find your next client, because then it makes you like, there's nothing wrong with being a salesperson, but it makes you, it's the opposite of what you want to communicate. It's like what the wrong connotation that we have with sales.
Welcome to Sales Made Easy, a podcast for business and personal growth. Join Harry Spaight as he hosts sales experts and business owners who share their journeys of personal growth and business success. Now, here's your host, Harry.
Adi Klevit is joining us on the Sales Made Easy podcast. And Adi is the founder and visionary of Business Success Consulting Group. And she and I are going to talk a little bit today about business processes. So Adi, welcome to the Sales Made Easy podcast. What's the good word for you?
Well, I guess we're going to talk about success.
I love it. So you have an interesting background. I think this is an area where a lot of small businesses can use some help as far as starting business processes. So where are small businesses falling short in this area, would you say, primarily?
I think it's mainly in the documentation, and starting with documentation and having it documented instead of in their heads, actually having a documentation of it.
Yeah. So like throughout the whole business, or is there an area that comes to mind that would be a great place to start to get people at least considering doing something a little different there?
Well, my answer to that is always find the area that if you had well-documented processes and procedures, you'll get the biggest return on investment.
Okay. So what comes to mind maybe for some business, and my dog is going to join the conversation here.
That's great.
Okay.
Why not?
But what, bring it- but what area in particular would this be? Would it be admin or sales or all of the above? What's your thought?
It really depends. It really depends on the business. And that's why I usually ask, it depends on the stage the business is at, depends on the pain points. I can give you examples. So, when I ask business owners, entrepreneurs, why they want to document their processes and procedures, different questions come up, right? So different answers. So that can be consistency. Maybe they want consistency. Okay. If you want consistency, you want to replicate something, then it might be in your operations. It might be that it's in the customer service area, that you have one customer service person answer a certain way and you have another one answer a different way. So then we need consistency with that regard. Or maybe they need to delegate and they hire somebody new, and that will be in the sales area. Great. Let's then document your sales process. Maybe they want to increase efficiency. And in order to do that, you actually have to document existing state. Like today, I was talking to one of my clients and we start documenting existing state and we start basically pulling it apart so we can find where they need to improve. And that was in their scheduling process, as an example. It can be that they are in a hiring mode and they don't have well-documented hiring procedures. So it really depends on the stage the organization is in and what is it that they want to accomplish of where we're actually going to start.
Oh, this is really good. My head is spinning in a lot of different directions here. So a small business owner that does not have the documentation, what's the typical scenario that they're going through that you would describe?
Well, they will have inefficiencies, inconsistencies. They will have turnover. They are afraid of hiring, afraid of onboarding.
Right. So like the first thing that comes to mind is the hiring, that they hire somebody and without the documentation, it's a lot of verbal, instruction that does not always get interpreted, nor do people remember everything. And then I can just see the outcome where there's a lot of frustration where a person might think they're doing something the right way. And the business owner might be saying, well, that's not what I told you. And so there's not real clarity. I mean, would that be an example that you see quite a bit or?
Absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
not a lot of clarity, but then you have to also spend time with the employees, training them. So you can't really remove yourself from the equation. Yeah, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of frustration, and I think that mentally, I'm just thinking that that would also prevent a small business owner from hiring somebody,
That's right.
right? So
That's
what's your
exactly
thought?
right. So that the fear of hiring, absolutely.
Yeah. So then they've got, I mean, I've been in this situation before, is just hiring an assistant and then saying, "Well, what is it you do?" And, they're like, "Well, I can do
Mm.
this and that." And it's just like, "Well, that's not really what I need." And then it's just not good from there. You've got to have some kind of plan as to what the person's going to be doing and how they're going to be filling up the day or the hours that you have hired them, right? Thoughts?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. So you have been doing this for a number of years. Was this your background in the corporate arena?
Yeah, my background is industrial engineering. That's how I got started. I've been doing it now, this line of work for over 30 years. This is what I love doing. I love putting organization and order and stability into businesses. And I found that by doing this in the area of implementing the process, writing and implementing processes and procedures, we can really make an impact in businesses.
Okay. So you've been doing this for a number of years, I've got to ask, what made you leave the corporate? Why did you decide to leave the company that you're working for and venture out on your own first? I'd like to ask that.
I always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I started two companies before. I I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted the freedom of doing that. I wanted the adventure. I got to a point where there was no more for me to move up in the company I was at, although it was a fantastic company. I felt like, what's the next step? You hit a certain point in your life. At that point I was turning 40 and I go like, okay, it's either I'm going to do it now or I'm not never going to do it. And I decided to take the plunge and do it and just like, hey, let's go for it. See what happens, and it was great. So it was a great decision.
Awesome. So when you were deciding to make this decision to go out on your own, did any thought come to mind that you needed to do something different, or did you just feel like bringing your experience from business into your own entity was the way to go? Or did you think like maybe if I open up a bowling alley or I'm just kidding, but I mean, was there any other thought as to a business that you might offer or do?
Not really, because I knew that I need to utilize my strengths, what I'm good at, what I learned, what I know what to do. I mean, it wasn't the time to adventure into something else. And it's my interest, it's my purpose. My purpose is to help businesses, to help people thrive, do well in life, basically expand in all areas of life. And I felt like I have like my own superpowers or my own ability, the things that I'm really good at is to go into a chaotic environment and bring order in. And that is what I love to do, right? So, and that's what I was able to do with clients, and that's what I pursued that line.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much describes the vast majority of businesses, doesn't it? I mean, are there a few that are I mean, is there an example that comes to mind of a large business that isn't filled with chaos that you would look at as saying that's a good example? Does anything come to mind for you?
Well, I mean, you will have some of the businesses, I look at it as a bell curve. You have the certain percentage at the top, certain percentage. So you have the certain percentage at the top that they have that natural inclination, or they hired somebody that is a process driven person and they can do it internally and they're very good at it. So you have like it's like a small percentage at the top. And then you have a small percentage at the bottom that no matter what you tell them, they're not going to do it. And then you have the people in the middle that they know they need to do it. They don't have the inclination or the time to do it, and they need the help in order to do it.
Yeah. All right. So does this raises a thought then about I imagine that when you're implementing these types of changes internally, there's got to be some resistance. What does that look like for you?
Well, it looks like a challenge that we know how to overcome, because what you need to do is you need to get buy-in.
Mm,
If you have somebody who has resistance, so I always get into communication, find out where the resistance is coming from, what they experience. Maybe they experienced something in the past that wasn't a good experience. and or they're afraid of something or whatever it is, we find out, but I really find out what's their purpose.
Mm,
Why do they want to document the processes and procedures? How would that help them, right? Like even today, I was talking to an employee and I asked her that question. She said, yesterday I was sick, but I had to come to work and I had to train somebody new because otherwise they wouldn't know what to do. If I had well documented processes, I can give it to them and they can follow it. So that's her why. That's why it will make sense for her to work with me or one of my staff to actually create those processes. So that is getting their own buy-in. If you
mm.
get but if you get continual resistance or somebody who is really doesn't want you to know what they're doing, then you become suspicious. Then there is a problem. And that will also, they will rule themselves out eventually because if you put more and more organization and more documentation and transparency, then those people are not going to be able to that are have something to hide or not doing the work will have to move out.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that job protection may be a base thought that someone might have is like, if this gets documented, then I become dispensable. Right.
It's yeah. One could think that way, but that's really a small thing because that's where you need to think about the overall view of the organization. Because if somebody thinks like that, then you don't have the right culture. And it's usually not the companies that I will work with because the companies that we work with are fast growing companies that are lacking consistency.
Mm.
But they're fast growing for a reason because they have a culture, they have people there. And creating that culture is based on transparency, on having well documented processes, etc., will actually lead to extension and lead to people wanting to share their knowledge and transferring that knowledge. So it's not, they take the responsibility of continuing and moving on the knowledge.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like if you have to work somewhere, that's the type of company you want to be around, right? Where
Oh,
there are
yeah,
no big
absolutely. And that's what we're
silos,
doing. Yeah.
right? So is that part of your, I don't know, discernment process of trying to determine if someone is worth that, is going to be worth your time investment to see what the culture is there already before you go all in?
Yeah, for sure. Or if there is a willingness to change too,
Mm.
that's also part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. So when you and I were chatting earlier, but I was surprised by your answer. You said that when you got into business on your own, you were all ready to view yourself as a salesperson. I think this is where a lot of small business owners are surprised the amount of selling that's required, the sales and marketing. Were there any surprises in your mind when you were going through leaving the corporate world to running your own business?
Not really, because my last position was VP of marketing and sales. So I knew exactly what it needed, because I was working in a medium-sized business. It wasn't like a huge, it was a privately held company with a lot. I mean, I was the VP of marketing and sales. So for me, my life was always meeting quotas and marketing. What's my next marketing campaign and cooperating with marketing companies and, what who are we selling? What's the leads? What's the pipeline? I was living it day in and day out. So it was no surprise for me. I mean, you have to do that. I mean, that's a huge part of the business. You cannot not sell. Otherwise, how are you going to get customers, clients?
Right. Well, when I looked at what your history was, I think of an engineer, or I'm not sure, what did you call yourself again? Was it
Industrial engineer. Yeah.
industrial engineer? Sales does not jump out at me. Sales and marketing does not jump out with me with industrial engineer. But somehow you've made some big adjustments over your career, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, yes, yes. I mean, you can tell. I mean, it wasn't like I was all into processes and all, but I made the adjustments. I found that I'm good at it. So yeah, we like anything else. You can try some things and you can make those adjustments when you find that you are good at it and learn about it. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Was there any surprise anywhere, or what was the biggest surprise that you had in venturing out on your own that you maybe didn't anticipate?
It's the networking part, because when I was working for somebody else, I didn't need to network,
Mm.
and that way of actually developing and nurturing relationship, it's something that I needed to learn. And luckily, I found mentors, and I found books, and I found organizations that I learned a lot out of by being part of them, and really learning how to network correctly and how to be a connector and somebody that people can reach out to in order to find out who they like, find resources, etc. I made myself, I love that. If I could, I say, it's kind of like a business matchmaker, right? I mean, that's like for me, like the best, connecting people that need to be connected, introducing people. That's how business is really being made. And that is something I never knew, because I wasn't really on the front line of the business development. I was more in the sales, either cold sales, telemarketing, or repeated sales. But there is a whole world out there in terms of networking, in terms of connections, in terms of knowing people, in terms of referrals, that I really enjoy, because I enjoy those connections.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, really good. That's such a great observation. So, what advice then would you give to a small business owner that's venturing out and says, well, maybe they just don't have the time, or they don't feel like they'd have the skill sets for networking. Maybe they're more of the engineer type, personality wise, maybe a little more introverted. What thoughts come to mind where you might help them with a process or something based on your experience?
Well, there is a process. You can learn how to network. It's not very hard. There are organizations out there that really teach you, like, for instance, VNI has been a six. I mean, I've been a member, not a member right now, but I was a member for many years, and that actually, what I love about it, one of the core values is time learn. I mean, basically,
Lifelong learner?
lifelong learnings. Thank you. I
Okay.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Lifelong
So,
learning. And then, when you learn that, I mean, they teach you how to actually network correctly.
mm,
So if you're a process driven person, then you will just follow the process. You will do the right things. You will figure out, you will observe what is the system, and you will basically work that system. So if the system is, you show up to the meeting and you come prepared, there is a very, very certain way that it will work if you actually give your pitch and what you do, right? So it's people can understand that. People know what it is. You have to meet outside the meeting. You reach out. You do one-to-ones. That's another example. You do you present in a compelling way. Your presentation. You are part of the leadership team. You take responsibility. You give to the chapter. Different areas like that. I mean, you don't have to be like this natural extroverted amazing networker. You can learn how to be a networker. You can learn follow up. If you're methodical, follow up is so important. I mean, I'm sure you can agree with that, because that's the essence of sales, is really follow up. It's if you follow up and stay on top of it and show genuine care, then people will eventually will come back and say yes. So there is a way of doing it. You just have to figure out the process and the methodology.
yeah, that's really good. And I 100% agree on the follow up. It's I think this is where the disconnect is. People go to a networking event, meet some people, maybe they're standing around having a coffee, small talk, and then nothing. Right. So, what would you suggest that they do differently after that?
You first of all have to have a purpose. When you go to a networking event, don't go, I'm going to find my next client here. This is not where you're going to find your next client, because then it makes you a like, there's nothing wrong with being a salesperson, but it makes you, it's the opposite of what you want to communicate. It's like the wrong connotation that we have with sales, right? Because when I'm going to a networking event, my purpose is to find some meaningful connections, either that I can help other people, that I can connect them, or some meaningful connections that can develop into something more in the future, right? So when you meet, two, three people that you feel like, okay, I want to know more about them. I want to understand their business. I want to see how I can help them. I want to see how we can collaborate. Then you choose those two, three, have a meaningful conversation, really mean it, really be interested in the person in front of you. If you're not really interested, then skip it. There is nothing going to happen, right?
Mm.
So you connect with 2 or 3 people, you take their information, and then you follow up with a true heartfelt communication. It was great talking to you. We talked about such and such and such. I would like to know more. Let's schedule a coffee meeting. Let's schedule a Zoom meeting, whatever it is. I want to know more about your business. I want to see how I can leverage my network to help you. Whatever the communication is. And then you meet with them, and then you ask questions and ask meaningful questions. Find out about them. Be curious and be also ready to be totally present and explain about your business. But I only do it if I'm being asked. I'm not going to volunteer the information and impose myself on somebody explaining to them what I do, because if they're not open to receive the communication, their communication is not going to get received. So,
Goodness, this is so textbook.
but it's true.
It's so good. I want this needs to be replayed. If you just listen to what Adi said about networking, everything she just said, we need to have that as our process. I mean,
Yeah.
it is so good. And right off the top of your head too, which tells me you lived it.
I do
Yeah.
live it. And it's like the worst thing is to go to a one-to-one or a coffee meeting or, a Zoom meeting, and you're not being asked. That means that the other person is not interested. But then you start, and just think about, like, when you had those instances, somebody start talking and telling you all about their business. You didn't even ask, because obviously for some reason you're not interested. And then it's just like, oh, I don't want to hear that pitch anymore. So just be prepared for it. But the majority of the people that are good at networking, they will go back and forth. There will be interest. There will be this engaging conversation back and forth. And that is good networking.
Yeah. I mean, so good. Yeah. I might have been on a few one-on-ones where and I don't mind doing all of the asking, right? Because it's just awkward. If I wasn't asking, I know you've been there, but if you're not asking the question, there is deafening silence, and the
Right,
person just
but then
doesn't
you
take the
also
cue.
know that there is no reciprocity, right? That there
Exactly.
is no back and forth, because
Yeah.
the people that are going to give you referrals, that are going to introduce you, then it's going to be, those are people that have the reciprocity, that they actually understand it, and it goes back and forth. If they don't already originate and ask you questions, that there is no giving in them, right? So that's self-selects as well. And when I said, you go into a networking event and you don't necessarily want to find your next, I mean, of course, we all want the clients, but that's not always what happens. What happens is that you tap into other people's network.
Right.
And that's what you need to understand, because you can meet somebody and you can ask the question, well, who would you like to be connected to? Yeah, I would like to be connected to business owners that are this and this and this, and they can be my clients. Okay, great. Well, the probability that I'm going to find somebody that will be your client is probably pretty low. It can happen and it will happen. But if you actually identify your sphere of influence and who are the people that are actually connecting to you, and you can get business from them, or they can connect their clients to you, that is a valuable connection as well. And you have to recognize that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you view it as the person that you're speaking has a crowd of 100 people behind them that are not in the room, that are just outside of the room. And we're talking to them, and maybe it's the first time we're trying to find out about them. And if they are speaking to the same crowd of people in their network, that would be ideal for us.
Right.
Right. If they're not speaking to that crowd, I mean, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I used the bowling alley, bowling business just a few minutes ago as a joke. But if you sell golf clubs and the person you're talking to does nothing but bowling, and the only people they know are about bowling and nothing ever about golf, you got to go find someone that's going to be talking to golfers. I mean, that as quick as I can come on the top of my feet here, but you get the idea, right? You have this group of people behind the person, and they could be potential clients or collaborators or recommenders as well. So those 100 people could turn into several hundred more when you start meeting that group of people. What's your thought on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to find those connections. It's connecting the dots and who is connected to who and all of that. Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, it sounds like a lot of work. So when people get exasperated because I'm laughing at the things I've heard over the years that people who are business owners that don't like networking, and they say, those people are not buying anything. Well, first of all, if you have that attitude that those people are not buying anything, you're probably going in with a lousy attitude, which is clearly seen, right? And so talk to me about that. I see you nodding. What's your thought?
You know, you're right. It's the attitude. I had the honor or the privilege of working with many, many entrepreneurs because we help them document and systematize the business. And those that were successful, those that had multiple businesses, those that were out there and cared about people, loved talking to people, and had their network.
Mm,
It doesn't mean that you have to go to networking events. I mean, but you can also go to like play golf, and that's a networking because you meet
right.
people, right? I mean, you can go to a trade association, that's meeting people. You have to get out there. There is no way you can, in my opinion, you can't be a business owner without having those connections unless you have a really good second in command that they are the ones that can do it. So maybe, like for instance, I can see like a client, like let's say a company, like a contractor, that the contractor is very good at swinging the hammer or doing the
Mhm.
renovations, but then they have their, let's say, the wife, which is like, she's the one who does all the networking.
Mm.
Okay, great. So you have somebody there, you have your partner that is doing the networking. Great, but somebody's doing it. So you can't have a business without those communication going to other people. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, especially I think of certain fields like technology where you have a lot of people who are very skilled with technology, maybe have shied away from the people side of the business and say, I could do this on my own. Might be some engineers in there, might be some construction workers that say, I could do this on my own. But yeah, what you just said about maybe it's the spouse, maybe it's someone they hired to help along with that, someone that's, maybe there's ways of doing that, but you're the one that has the passion for your business. It's very hard to outsource that, right? What's your thought?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. So, yeah, what you described, though, is a great process. It's really all about the way you described going into the meetings, not looking to sell, looking to collaborate, looking to find referral partners, being intentional. If we write that stuff down before we go to a network meeting or we're out on the golf course and we show that we're curious, if a person is not curious about you, why would they give you a recommendation?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And you have to recognize that because otherwise you come across as desperate. Trying to explain to somebody who is not curious about you, they're just not, it's not part of your tribe. I mean, they're just not, they don't care. So why even try to, I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, you could try to interest them because maybe there is something that, you could interest in some ways. Maybe they just didn't notice you or whatnot. And maybe they're having a bad day. I don't know. But, you could start striking, start a conversation. My point being is that you can, of course, interest people. That's what a good salesperson can do, because maybe there is something they're not aware of. But you have to use your judgment. You have to have somebody on the other end that you got them interested so you can communicate.
Yeah, so good. I was chuckling while you were saying that. I was at an event recently and there was a couple there, and I tried to small talk the couple a little bit just to see where they lived. And, it was really mundane. It's not ideal conversation starter. And I got nothing. And I went, oh, this is interesting. It was the awkward silence after I threw out a very mediocre question. They gave me like a 1 or 2 word answer. Clearly not interested. So I ended up finding out where they sat, and I said, "I'm not giving up here for whatever reason." Sometimes it's just the sheer desire to turn something around, right? I was off on the wrong foot, and I said, I'm gonna try some more. I went back and tried a little more small talk. I can't tell you what I said. And there's still silence. And then after this uncomfortable pause, the person asked me a question. And then it just took off from there. Right?
Right.
It was that uncomfortable pause that the person is either really introverted or they're really thoughtful, but it just surprised the heck out of me. And then we had this conversation, and even in the conversation, Adi, I would say something, and I felt like I needed to count to 10.
Yeah, that
Right.
happens. That happens. And you have to recognize that. So you really have to see who you have in front of you and adjust to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like you're really good at that. I mean, this is something that you have done for years, and I think there's a lot of us who are newer. I'm very similar to you. I came out of an environment where I was a sales leader, never really networked, and then learning over the past couple of years, I still have lots of room to grow. But yeah, it's like sometimes I go to these events, it's like, why am I here? But I have to remind myself that each one of these people represents their own little community that
Right.
getting to know them is really super
And
helpful.
and when that happens to me, if I go to an event, I go like, why am I here? What helps me is also asking the question, who can I help here?
Yeah,
So maybe
so
it's not
good.
for me, but who can I help? And you start looking at that and you look around and you are interested, it creates a huge difference. Huge difference.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Super helpful. Hopefully, the listeners will have a new perspective of networking, or at least reminded of how good it can be. And I really did not expect the conversation to go here, but it's very cool that you brought this up, that this was a surprise when you got started in your business, especially with all of the sales and marketing side of it.
Yeah.
So super helpful. Any thoughts that I missed on about your business that you would like to bring up about your business process or whatever that I might have missed here for you that you'd like to
I
share?
think so. I think we covered a lot and I think it was a great conversation and I appreciate it. And hopefully I was able to help the listeners.
Well, you absolutely did. This has been a blast. Where can people find more of Adi Klevit, my dear?
LinkedIn will be a great place. So just go to LinkedIn, Adi Klevit, or you can go to our website, bizsuccesscg.com. Also, you can call or text at 503-662-2911. And it's a great way to get a hold of us.
Perfect. Well, this has been a blast, Adi. Much success to you in helping the small business to build up the processes so that they can be more sustainable. And I look forward to seeing more of you in the future. Really appreciate your visit here today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Sales Made Easy. If you found value in our conversations, please subscribe and leave a review. Our goal is to provide practical strategies for growing your business while staying true to your values. Remember, success in sales is about serving your clients. Serve first, and the selling will follow. We'll be back soon with more insights and inspiration. Until then, keep serving and providing value to others. Good things will happen.